We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. The Truman Show, 1998. You're being watched, not just by cameras or your phone or Google, but by everyone, your followers, your fans, your friends, your haters. Every moment curated, every glance monitored. Welcome to the age of digital panopticism. In 1998, The Truman Show warned us about a man trapped in a world of artificial perfection, televised 24/7 without his knowledge. It was fiction, but now it feels like prophecy. From TikTok confessionals to influencer surveillance scandals, our lives are increasingly performative and increasingly public. We're all starring in our own shows now, whether we realize it or not. So what happens when authenticity becomes a brand and privacy becomes a relic of the past? Chapter 1. The Truman Show and the Birth of Paranoid Entertainment. When The Truman Show was released in 1998, it was widely viewed as a clever satire about reality television. But looking back now, it feels far more like an unsettling prediction. The film follows Truman Burbank, a man who's unknowingly lived his entire life on a massive television set, under constant surveillance. Every person in his life, his wife, his friends, his co-workers, is an actor. Every aspect of his environment is controlled by a production team. Truman doesn't know he's the star of a 24/7 broadcast, and the audience, both within the film and in real life, is watching his every move. The film arrived at a cultural turning point. By the late 1990s, the rise of reality television had already began. Shows like The Real World, which debuted in 1992, had started to blur the line between private life and public entertainment. In 2000, just 2 years after The Truman Show, Big Brother and Survivor would premiere and become massive hits. These shows introduced a new kind of spectacle: ordinary people placed in artificial environments and filmed continuously. The appeal was voyeuristic. Viewers got to observe unscripted drama, emotional breakdowns, and personal moments. People started to realize that real lives, edited and packaged, could be just as entertaining as fictional stories. But The Truman Show clearly anticipated the rise of reality TV. It also drew from deeper cultural and literary anxieties about surveillance, control, and the illusion of freedom. Two novels are especially relevant here: George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Orwell's book, published in 1949, depicted a dystopian society where every citizen was constantly monitored by the state through telescreens, and individual freedom was crushed under authoritarian rule. I mean, that feels like now. Surveillance in 1984 is direct, aggressive, and fear-based. In contrast, The Brave New World, written in 1932, portrayed a society controlled not through violence, but through pleasure and distraction. Citizens were sedated with entertainment, consumer goods, and superficial relationships. In Huxley's vision, people accepted their lack of freedom because their lives were comfortable and pleasurable. That definitely feels like now. The Truman Show blends both of these visions. Truman's world is tightly controlled, like in 1984, but it's designed to be pleasant, picturesque, and comforting, more in line with Brave New World. He's monitored constantly, but not through force. Instead, he's manipulated through routine, familiarity, and a sense of normalcy. His fear of water, for example, is artificially created to keep him from leaving the set. The goal isn't just to watch Truman, but to ensure that he never questions the reality he lives in. The control is psychological, not physical. The structure of Truman's environment also has historical significance. The town of Sea Haven is built inside a massive dome, where every inch is surveilled by hidden cameras. This setup echoes the concept of a Panopticon, a theatrical prison design introduced by philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th century. The Panopticon features a central observation tower surrounded by a circular building of cells. Prisoners never know if they're being watched, so they begin to act as though they were at all times. The result is self-surveillance. People regulate their own behavior because of the possibility that someone might be watching. The power of surveillance doesn't come from actual observation, but from the internalization of that possibility. The same psychological effect is central to The Truman Show. Truman behaves in unpredictable, docile ways because he's never had a reason to question his world. His sense of reality is shaped by what he's allowed to see and experience. The audience watching from outside the dome becomes complicit. They are entertained by his ignorance, even as they begin to root for his escape. The show is popular in the film's universe, suggesting that people have accepted surveillance not just as normal, but as desirable. Interestingly, after the release of The Truman Show, a real-life psychological condition began to emerge. Some individuals started reporting what clinicians called the Truman Show delusion. They believed their lives were being filmed and broadcast without their consent. They felt that strangers were actors and that their environments were being manipulated. Though classified as a psychiatric delusion, it wasn't hard to see why people might feel this way. By the early 2000s, reality TV had exploded, and social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube were turning everyday people into public figures. The line between personal life and performance was disappearing. Even before the internet fully transformed our lives, The Truman Show was already identifying the cultural shift. From private individuals to performative identities, from authentic experience to constructed narrative. And unlike Orwell's or Huxley's characters, who were largely victims of state control, modern individuals were beginning to volunteer for visibility. The Panopticon was no longer a prison imposed from above. It was a platform we climbed onto willingly. In this context, The Truman Show wasn't just a film about one man being watched. It was a film about all of us. It anticipated a world where privacy would be optional and surveillance would be participatory. A world where people could create their own reality shows in the form of daily vlogs, live streams, and curated Instagram stories. And a world where those who refused to participate would seem suspect, like they were hiding something. As we entered the 21st century, that world was no longer hypothetical. It was being built, on camera, one confession and one follower at a time. Chapter 2, The Panopticon Goes Personal. Main character syndrome. TikTok didn't invent the concept of turning everyday life into a narrative, but it has refined and popularized it to the point of near universality. What once may have been the domain of personal diaries or reality television is now part of the average person's daily routine. Users record their morning coffee rituals, trips to the grocery store, breakups, emotional crisis, skincare routines, and therapy reflections. These moments are packaged into aesthetically pleasing clips, often with soft music, polished editing, and relatable captions. The process is so widespread that it has become second nature. Life is lived through the lens of potential content. What sets TikTok apart from earlier platforms like Instagram and Facebook is its algorithmic design, which rewards immediacy, vulnerability, and constant engagement. On TikTok, the more authentic a moment appears, the more likely it goes viral. This creates a paradox. Users are encouraged to present themselves as raw and real, but that presentation must still be strategic and appealing enough to attract attention. And as a result, even private or painful experiences, crying in your car, opening up about trauma, struggling with mental health, are filtered through the expectations of a public audience. It may feel honest, but it is still a performance. This is where the concept of the main character syndrome comes in. Often used jokingly, the term describes the way people behave as if they are protagonists in a story that others are meant to witness. But underneath the humor is a real shift in behavior. People increasingly shape their lives as if they are constantly being observed, even when no one is watching in that moment. They speak to the camera not just to share, but to document, to validate, to archive their experience in a format that's consumable by others. Activities that were once mundane, getting ready for work, cooking dinner, walking the dog, are now being seen as moments to be aestheticized and shared. This kind of behavior reflects what social theorists call internalized surveillance, the original idea of the Panopticon, a prison where inmates don't know if they're being watched, so they behave as if they always are, was about external control. But in the digital age, it's no longer about guards or cameras. It's about followers, algorithms, and parasocial relationships. The power to observe has shifted from institutions to individuals. And more importantly, that power has moved inside us. We begin to watch ourselves from the perspective of an imagined audience. People begin editing themselves in real time, even off camera. What would this look like on video? Would this get likes? Is this moment relatable? These aren't just passing thoughts. They start to shape decision-making, behavior, and identity. You become your own producer, editor, and PR team. You self-monitor and self-brand. Over time, the gap between who you are and who you appear to be can become difficult to distinguish. And importantly, this shift doesn't only affect influencers or content creators. It has become a cultural norm, particularly among younger generations who have grown up online. Children are now raised in homes where every milestone is documented and posted. Teenagers talk to the cameras naturally as to their friends. Young adults think in terms of narratives, how a breakup or job loss might be presented online as part of a personal growth arc. The structure of social media platforms encourages this, with tools that mimic editing software, analytics that track engagement, and constant feedback in the form of likes, comments, and views. The emotional consequences of this hyper visibility can be significant. There can be increased pressure to be interesting, to always have something to say, to perform, even sadness or struggle in a way that's palatable and engaging. For many, this creates a constant sense of exposure and self-doubt. Instead of living privately and reflecting internally, people externalize everything in real time. That feedback loop can be both addictive and exhausting, and it often leads to burnout, anxiety, and disorienting feeling that your life is no longer fully your own. And just like Truman, many people don't realize the extent to which they are being shaped by invisible forces, audience expectations, algorithmic incentives, cultural trends. They believe they are freely expressing themselves, when in reality they are performing roles within a system that quietly rewards conformity and spectacle. In this new form of digital Panopticon, there's no need for an external warden. The watchers are everywhere, and often they include ourselves. Chapter 3. Authenticity as Aesthetic, the Curated Self. In today's influencer economy, the idea of being authentic has become a valuable form of branding. On social media platforms, users are rewarded not just for polished content, but for appearing vulnerable, flawed, and emotionally open. This has created a digital environment where authenticity is no longer simply about being genuine. It's about performing a style. It's common to see influencers cry on camera, discuss their mental health struggles, or share intimate details about their personal relationships. These posts are often framed as unfiltered and raw, but they're still shaped by the algorithms, aesthetics, and expectations of the platform. The goal is no longer to appear relatable while still maintaining engagement and visibility. One term that's emerged to describe this trend is sad fishing, a practice where users post emotional or distressing content in order to attract attention, sympathy, or engagement. While some of this content is sincere, it's often difficult to separate real emotional disclosure from strategic self-presentation. This is especially true in a media environment where vulnerability tends to perform well, leading some creators to consistently highlight personal hardships in order to maintain relevance. Over time, even deeply personal experiences can become part of content strategy. This evolution reflects a broader trend, the transformation of the self into a brand. The digital persona is not just a reflection of someone's personality, it's a carefully managed asset. Influencers curate their identities through the visual style, tone, and storytelling choices. For instance, the hot girl walk trend promotes a version of wellness that's accessible, aspirational, and easy to package for social media. TikTok therapists create mental health content that combines professional insights with personal antidotes, often blurring the line between education and entertainment. Trauma dumping diary videos where creators share painful experiences in a confessional tone build a sense of intimacy that can quickly translate into loyalty and engagement. This strategy is effective because it gives audiences a sense of connection, but it also creates new pressures. Just like Truman's wife in The Truman Show, who casually promotes household products during arguments, today's influencers often juggle emotional content with sponsored ads, product placements, or affiliate links. feelings. The result is a kind of emotional labor that's deeply entangled with marketing. Even when content appears spontaneous, it often is produced within the structure, brand partnerships, monetization goals, or engagement algorithms. The line between lived experience and sales pitch becomes increasingly thin. One of the more troubling outcomes of this environment is how it changes the way people relate to privacy. On social media, consistent posting is expected. If someone suddenly stops sharing, followers may become suspicious or concerned. Silence isn't interpreted as a boundary, it's treated as an absence or even a red flag. This creates an implicit demand to remain visible at all times. When visibility is equated with relevance and attention is treated as a form of currency, the pressure to stay present becomes intense. For many creators, this results in a cycle of content extraction. Life events, good or bad, are mined for moments that can be posted, shared, or repackaged into narrative arcs. Milestones become content opportunities. Breakups become mini documentaries. Even grief is expected to be processed online. Over time, this can lead to a disconnection between experience and reflection. People begin to record events in real time rather than process them privately. They react publicly instead of reflecting personally. Ultimately, the digital economy rewards visibility, not introspection. And the most effective form of visibility today is what looks like honesty. Even if that honesty is curated. The more real a person seems, the more they are trusted, followed, and monetized. But that appearance of realness is often the result of careful editing, scripting, and self-management. As a result, authenticity becomes less about truth and more about style. It's an aesthetic, a way of performing that taps into emotional cues while still supporting the underlying mechanics of content creation. In this environment, privacy doesn't just become rare, it becomes suspicious. To be offline is to be unseen. To be unseen is to be irrelevant. So people stay visible. They stay active. They continue to share, not necessarily because they want to, but because the digital economy demands it. And slowly, the curated self becomes the primary self, not because it's more real, but because it's the one thing that people recognize. Chapter 4: Surveillance, Capitalism, and the Visible Eye. While individuals spend time recording and uploading their lives for public viewing, there is another, less visible system also observing them, automated, constant, and deeply embedded into the platforms we use every day. This system is known as surveillance capitalism, a term coined by Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff. It refers to an economic model in which personal data is collected, analyzed, and sold profit. In this framework, users are not the customer, they are the product. Companies like Google and Meta, Amazon and TikTok have built vast infrastructures to monitor and record every user behavior. Every search, click, like, scroll, and pause is tracked. Facial recognition software can identify expressions. Microphones can detect keywords. Location data is constantly logged. This data is then fed into complex algorithms designed not just to understand what users are doing, but to predict what they will do next. Over time, these predictions are used to influence behavior, what content is shown, what ads appear, and what posts are promoted or suppressed. This represents a shift from older forms of surveillance that were primarily about observation and control. Surveillance capitalism goes beyond watching it. It harvests user behavior to build profiles that can be sold to advertisers, political campaigns, or other interested entities. The information users provide, often unknowingly, is used to shape their online experiences. If a person hesitates for 3 seconds on a video, that moment becomes data. If they constantly interact with certain types of content, the algorithm reinforces it. Over time, this creates a feedback loop in which users are subtly nudged in specific directions. What to buy, what to follow, what to believe. This process is largely invisible to users. Unlike traditional advertising, which was obvious and direct, algorithmic targeting is personalized and often imperceptible. People don't always realize that the content they see on their feeds is a result of predictive analytics, not a neutral representation of what's trending or most relevant. These systems are designed to keep users engaged for as long as possible, and they're incredibly effective at doing so. The longer someone stays online, the more data is collected, and the more accurately their behavior can be modeled and monetized. In The Truman Show, Truman is watched by one central figure, Christoph, who controls the world around him. In contrast, today's users are watched by countless systems simultaneously. These systems are decentralized, impersonal, and driven by machine learning, not human intention. Yet they are arguably more powerful because they operate quietly and continuously. The average user may not know how their feed is curated, but the consequences are significant. What they see can shape their beliefs, moods, and spending habits, and even political views. Despite the growing awareness of these practices, most people continue to participate in them. In fact, many feel they have no choice. Social and economic life is now deeply integrated with digital platforms. Jobs, relationships, and cultural relevance often depend on maintaining an online presence. As a result, visibility has become a form of safety and validation. To be seen is to exist within the system. To go offline or disappear is to risk becoming irrelevant socially and professionally and personally. This creates a new kind of anxiety. Users fear being shadow banned, a situation in which platforms suppresses content without informing the user, more than they fear being monitored. That fear isn't irrational. For content creators, a drop in engagement can mean financial loss. For everyday users, it can feel like a form of social isolation. And in this economy, attention is currency, and losing visibility can feel like being erased. Ultimately, surveillance capitalism isn't just a technology issue, it's a cultural shift. It changes how people understand themselves, how they make decisions, and how they relate to others. The pressure to stay online, stay active, and stay seen is reinforced by economic and psychological incentives. People are rewarded not just for participation, but for consistency. Algorithms prioritize frequent engagement, which means users are constantly producing, consuming, and interacting in order to maintain their place in the digital landscape. Unlike Truman, who eventually finds the wall on his artificial world and escapes, there is no clear exit for users in real world. The systems are integrated into daily life. They're embedded in phones, homes, workplaces, and even relationships. And because the surveillance is participatory, voluntarily uploaded, liked, and shared, it feels less like control and more like routine. But make no mistake, these systems are shaping human behavior in ways that are subtle, persistent, and deeply profitable for the companies that run them. Chapter 5. Escape isn't an option, it's the final act at the end of the Truman Show. Truman Burbank finally discovers the edge of the fabricated world. He reaches a literal wall painted to look like a sky and exits through a door that leads into the unknown. It's a powerful metaphor for breaking free from illusion, surveillance, and manipulation. But in our world today, the idea of escape is much more complicated. The structures that shape our digital lives don't exist behind one clear boundary. They're everywhere, interwoven into how we communicate, work, socialize, and even think. There's no single door to walk through. In the age of social media, even logging off is not a private act. Digital disappearances have to be explained, justified, and often publicly announced. Influencers and everyday users alike post "I'm taking a break" videos, deactivate their accounts with dramatic final posts, or share long captions explaining their need for rest, privacy, and mental clarity. Ironically, these moments of retreat become content themselves. A farewell post might receive more attention than a week's worth of normal activity. Followers like, comment, and speculate. Even silence now carries meaning. This creates a paradox where stepping away from digital life is just another kind of performance. The act of logging off can feel less like an exit and more like a stage pause. Users are still aware of the audience, even in absence. They may worry about losing relevance, disappointing followers, or being perceived as unstable. The emotional social labor of explaining your exit ends up reinforcing the exact systems you're trying to take a break from. And for many people, the desire to disconnect is outweighed by the fear of being forgotten. In a world where visibility often translates into validation, influence, or income, going offline can feel like erasure. Users may not feel coerced into staying online, but they understand that staying visible is safer, socially and economically. The attention economy has trained people to equate engagement with self-worth. If no one was watching, the logic goes, Do you still matter? This isn't limited to influencers or people with large platforms. Regular users also feel the pull to remain active, to maintain their digital presence, to continue shaping how they are seen. Job opportunities, social connections, and community involvement increasingly happen online. Profiles are scanned before interviews. Dating apps replace in-person introductions. Social media functions as a digital resume, a social circle, and a personal archive. To disappear from it can feel like severing yourself from public life. The result is constant state of performance, even if we don't always recognize it as such. People document their lives as they live them, often in real time. They edit their words and images for maximal relatability. They curate not what they post, but how they appear across platforms. The boundaries between public and private, personal and professional blur until almost everything feels like content. And perhaps the most unsettling realization is that many people no longer want to escape. The rewards of participation, validation, and connection, attention are deeply ingrained. The architecture of constant sharing has become second nature. Even those who feel exhausted by its struggle to imagine life without it. What would it mean to not be seen? To not share, to only have experiences that exist only for yourself. In that way, the Panopticon has evolved. It no longer requires a central authority watching from above. It doesn't need walls, towers, or guards. It operates through habits, platforms, and internalized expectations. We broadcast ourselves and we perform for an audience that never truly logs off. We don't just live in a surveillance society. We've absorbed its logic. We've learned to surveil ourselves and each other. We are no longer just participants. We are the watchers, the content, and the system itself. At the end of The Truman Show, Truman delivers a quiet but powerful line before stepping into the unknown. "You never had a camera in my head." It's his final assertion of agency, his way of reclaiming the only thing the show couldn't reach, his thoughts. That line resonates even more deeply today because we now live in a world where even our thoughts feel externalized. Through captions, voiceovers, mental health disclosures, and running commentaries, we've trained ourselves to narrate our lives to others in real time. The boundary between our eternal lives and our public identities is more porous than ever. The Truman Show was never just about television. It was about constant control and the performance of self under surveillance. It asks whether we ever truly know ourselves when our entire environment is constructed to keep us comfortable and complicit. In many ways, we didn't heed the film's message. Instead, we leaned into it. We built platforms and technologies that encourage constant exposure. We invited the cameras in. We normalized a culture of broadcasting our private lives and created an economy around it. The dome Truman lived in has been replaced by data infrastructure, endless timelessness, and algorithmic recommendation engines. But the effect is similar. A controlled reality curated by invisible systems where users place roles, crafted partly by choice and partly by code. In this new version of the Panopticon, there are no walls or guards, but there are still consequences. Algorithms reward certain behaviors, while punishing others through invisibility. Popularity is tracked through numbers. Silence is interpreted as irrelevance. Every digital action becomes a signal, liked or not, boosted or buried. Unlike Truman, who was being watched by millions without knowing, we not only know we're being watched, we actively participate in it. We produce ourselves, we brand our identities, we monitor each other and internalize the feedback. What we call authenticity often functions as branding in disguise. Social media platforms have taught us how to present our struggles in ways that feel digestible, aesthetic, and emotionally resonant, but never too alienating. There's a fine line between vulnerability and marketability, and we've learned how to walk it. The most successful creators aren't necessarily the most truthful. They're the ones who are the best at appearing truthful. And the scariest part, most of us now engage in that performance unconsciously. It's not that we're lying, it's that we've stopped recognizing how much of what we share is shaped by what will be seen. So what happens when every moment is a potential post? When every emotion becomes content? When even an attempt to disconnect gets filtered through digital detox hashtag? We end up in a loop where the only way to feel real is to be perceived, and where not being perceived feels like disappearing. The Truman Show ends with a hopeful ambiguity. Truman walks off the set, finally free. But our story doesn't have a clear exit. The platforms remain open, the feeds never end, and the pressure to stay visible never fully lifts. For most of us, walking away isn't feasible or even desirable. We're too integrated into the system. Our social lives, our professional identities, and our sense of self-care are now tightly bound to being online. So the next time you reach for your phone to record a moment, to post an update, to share something painful or triumphant, pause and ask yourself, is this for you or is it for them? Are you sharing your truth or packaging it? Are you seeking connection or visibility? Because the cameras are still rolling. They're just invisible now. And in this new world, you're not the star of your story. You're also the director, the editor, and the PR team, the viewer and the gatekeeper of your own performance. That's the twist that Panopticon no longer watches us. We watch ourselves. So thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments below. I'm always creeped out. I really feel like we're being watched and listened to by our phones, and we're doing this willingly, which is crazy. All right, thanks for watching.